Now, today is honestly probably the reason why I got into teaching seventh grade history. Today's topic is a very grim one, but perhaps this is the most relevant topic that we are going to talk about this entire semester. Today's topic, as you guys can see, is called the Black Death. Now, considering what is happening on the earth today, I cannot imagine a topic more fitting to discuss in world history. Now, disclaimer, if you hear a bunch of banging in my house, they're redoing my roof, so it's not any machine guns or anything. It's just people pounding the shingles off of my roof. But back to the point at hand. This image that you're looking in front of you, the longer you look at it, the more you will realize that this is a very grim piece of artwork. Now, this was painted by a guy named Peter Bruegel. Now, Peter Bruegel, we will actually learn about in a couple weeks from now, but what he was is he was a Renaissance painter. Now, little preview, the Renaissance is the period of history that comes almost immediately after the Black Death. Now, Peter Bruegel looked back at the happenings of the Black Death and created this painting. Now, as you guys can see, there is death all over this painting. People in the church are represented as dying. This guy down here is royalty. He is representing as dying. All of these people are being huddled into a giant casket as this army of death is attacking, mercilessly killing. There's really disgusting things. If you want to pause this video and take a look at this painting, please do so. You'll enjoy seeing all of the nastiness here. Now, the reason why Peter Bruegel painted this wasn't an exaggeration of death. What he painted was his experience of what the Black Death did to Europe. So without further ado, my friends, let's talk about my favorite topic in all of history, the Black Death. Now, I always like to start this with a little bit of a familiar story. So kids, how many of you have heard this song before?
Ring around the rosy pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down.
Oh, now, that's freaky. Now, I'm sure that most of you kids, when you were in preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, whatever, have played this game before, Ring Around the Rosies, where you grab hands with your partners and you spin around and you laugh and you giggle. And once you make it to the we all fall down, you fall on the ground and you giggle. Now, what you probably did not know is that that song was originally written about the Black Death. Now, let's go through the lyrics. First off, Ring Around the Rosies. If you've ever been to a graveyard before, what you see at graveyards is you see headstones, and atop the headstones are typically a bunch of flowers. Now, if you have ever gone to a funeral, what happens is that the family of the person who is dead makes a circle around the grave and they put flowers on top of the grave. Essentially, they are making a ring around the rosies. Okay, now line number 2. When I was a kid, I remember hearing this and it was just and I had no idea what they were actually saying. So I looked it up, and sure enough, what they're saying is pockets full of posies. Now that beckons the question, what the heck is a posy? A posy is a flower, and a posy is a flower that smells really good. So if you are hanging around dead things, you would fill your pockets with posies so that you could smell the posies rather than smelling the dead, rotting bodies. Line number 3, ashes, ashes. You don't need to be a brainiac to know where these ashes are coming from. During the Black Death, so many people were dying that they couldn't even bury them fast enough. So what they would do is they would take big piles of dead bodies, throw a match on them, and light them on fire. The ashes of the dead bodies would be coming down upon you. Finally, line number 4, we all fall down. That is literally referencing people catching this disease and falling down dead. Now, that beckons the question, okay, how on earth did the Black Death come about? We know that this coronavirus came as a result of somebody consuming or eating a bat. Now, today, let me introduce you to the villains of the Black Death. Villain number 1. And his trusty sidekick, now, the villains of the Black Death are two creatures that you see all over this slide. Number one, the villain of the rat. These black rats were huge, and they were all over Europe. We'll talk about those in a couple moments. However, these rats would not be able to affect people unless there was the flea. Now, the way that fleas work is fleas survive on one thing and one thing only. Fleas drink blood. So the way that the Black Death spread is that these rats were the original creatures that had the Black Death. Now, here's the problem. These rats all were covered in fleas. The problem is this. A flea jumps onto a rat, takes a little bite, bink, sucks a little bit of blood, and then, bing, jumps off to somewhere else. Now, if this flea was to jump off of a rat, bink, come onto my neck, and take a little bite out of me, I now have about 7 days left on this earth. Between 3 and 7 days is the likely time of survival once you were inflicted with the Black Death. The Black Death killed you, and it killed you very, very, very quickly. This is not something that would take a long time. Now, this all was occurring during the 1300s, this thing called the bubonic plague. We historians today call it Black Death. This spread all across all of Europe and all of Asia. Now, the reason why it's called a bubonic plague is kind of a weird reason. Now, whether you are a boy or a girl, you have these things in your body called buboes. Now, your buboes are located in several parts of your body. Now, you have two buboes right here in your neck. You have two buboes right here in your armpits. And then you have two buboes right around here in your hips. They're these little lumps that you can actually feel. Now, the reason why this disease is called the bubonic plague is that that is what is infected. What happens is that flea bites you, your time starts ticking, and your buboes start to swell. Now, these things are really gross. They'll start filling with blood to the point where they can get as big as the size of a softball. So you would have two bloody packets on either side of your neck. You would have two bloody packets in your armpits, and you would have two bloody packets on either side of your hips. Now, if you think that that is bad, it actually gets a little bit worse, but let's continue talking. Now, the question is, why on earth would there be so many rats in Europe? How did this disease impact and spread so quickly and easily? I want you to think of rats like this. Before we had things like garbage man, or before we had things like trash trucks, these are essentially the medieval garbage men. If you had trash, you would throw it out into the streets. The rats would come and eat it and take it away. People living in medieval times actually enjoyed having rats around because they would keep the cities clean.
Yes, now, back again.
I know.
Shady's
You
back.
just can't get rid of these guys, right? Who on earth is responsible for this Black Death? Of course it's coming from the Mongols, because the Mongols seem to do everything, right? Now, historians have traced back the origins of the Black Death, and it started right over here in the Empire of the Great Khans. It started somewhere around the Gobi Desert near China, spread because of the Mongol Empire. And it spread so quickly because it was spreading along these things called the Silk Roads. We've talked about this.
Yes.
The question is, what about the Mongols would encourage the spread of the Black Death? Think about this, kids. We already learned about the Mongols and how they had such a good and efficient and effective system of trades. Remember, their roads were perfectly safe, whether you were traveling by day or by night. So if you have roads that trade super conveniently and easily, diseases also are traded along these roads super quickly, efficiently, and easily. And these diseases were brutal. Now, the Black Death had massive, tremendous effects and results. As this disease spread across Europe, across Asia, it decimated the population. Historians today estimate between 30% and 60% of people in Europe died in this disease in a period of 4 years. Now think about how insane that is. Between 30 and 60%, let's just go the average, about 50%. Think of half of the people that you know dying in 4 years. That is massive. Now the effects of the Black Death, obviously the number one is a population decrease. But as population decreases, that allows for new opportunities for women and beggars, people who previously had very, very, very few opportunities. Now, because there's so many less people on Earth, they all of a sudden have new opportunities. Now, the system of feudalism that, because of the Crusades, was weakened, the Black Death completely eliminates this system of feudalism. It goes bye-bye. No more kings, queens, lords, ladies, knights, peasants, serf. That system is gone. Another bad part about the Black Death is people did not understand germ theory, so they had to blame somebody. So what they did is they blamed these people called the Jews, and what they would do is they would take big groups of Jews, throw them into a pit and light them on fire, begging God, saying, God, look, we are getting rid of these heretics. Please save us of this disease. In addition, as you saw in the very first slide, art becomes a whole lot less religious. It starts being drawn of really morbid things, guts, blood, skeletons, etc. And people massively start losing faith in the church. If you are used to asking God, please help us, why are you allowing this to happen? And half of the people that you know are still dying, people start losing faith in the church. Now, I wanted to show you this because this is actually going to show you just how massive this was. I want you to first look right down here. You see this COVID-19? This information was gathered 4 days ago today. This little bubble is how many people have died worldwide from COVID-19 outbreak. Let's compare this bubble to what happened during the Black Death. Look at the massive amount of people that died. 200 million people. So compared to today, not saying that today's outbreak is not bad. It is miserable. It is awful. It is terrible. But historically speaking, compare today's COVID-19 outbreak to the Black Death, and you can just see how massively devastating this is. Now, if you would like to send me an email asking for me to explain this guy, I'd be happy to, but I'm trying to keep this video as short as possible. This guy is a plague doctor. We can have discussions all about that. Seek me if you would like to talk about it. Now, when I was in 7th grade, my teachers taught me this as well, but what they never did is they never showed me what this disease actually looked like. I left 7th grade thinking, okay, yeah, that's a bad disease, but I never really got to see how horrible this is. So warning, I'm going to show you what this disease does to a person. If you don't want to look, don't. Just simply stop the video here. You'll be good. Enjoy this cute piggy. Stare at that piggy and then shut your eyes and stop this video, because in 3, 2, 1, I am going to the next slide. In 3, 2, 1. This is why it's called the Black Death. What would happen is all of the blood in your fingertips and your toes would stop moving. If you've ever gotten a bruise, that's what happens. All of your fingertips, all of your toes would turn a jet black. And if I was to go and start picking at this person's skin, their fingertips would fall off. Now, right over here, we have an example of a bubo. This is starting to grow. You can see the black discolorization. Down here, you can see that these fingers are so rotten that they're getting moldy. Oh, I can't even look at it. These ones down here, these are probably a day or so from falling off on their own. Now, enough of that. I have kids ask me all the time, Hunsinger, is this Black Death still around? The answer, unfortunately, is yes. These are recent headlines. Note, November 13th, 2019, 2 people just got the Black Death in China. Down here, November 19th, bubonic plague, 3rd case of plague in China. As pandemic begins, the plague is coming. This stuff is still around. It is essential to stay healthy, kids. Learn from history. What we need to do is stay as safe as possible and trust science. Now, kids, I hope that you enjoyed this lecture. Next year, when we go back into school, if you want to talk to me more about this, I'd be happy to. But I have to end this now because I only have a 15-minute limit. I love you, kids. I miss you. Enjoy today's lesson. Enjoy the questions. They should be easy and simple. And I will see you back here tomorrow.